Dear learners, this is the last uh, units of the contemporary political thoughts of the block number three, that is the powers. Here I'm going to elaborate about the powers. Power is basically is a central concept in a various fields, including the political science, sociology, psychology, and philosophy. It refers to the capacity or ability of individuals, groups, or institutions to influence or control the actions, beliefs, or outcomes in a particular context. Power manifests in many forms, from physical forces to more subtitle forms of the influence, and play a fundamental role in shaping human relationships, organizations, and the society. Here is a detailed explorations of the concept of the powers. That is the definitions of the power. According to the Max Weber, it defines the German sociologist Max Weber famously defined power is the ability of an individuals or a groups to impose their wills on the others. Even when opposed, this definition emphasizes the coercion and authority, the ability to command obedience, or even in the cases of resistance. Robert Dahl definitions. Political scientist Robert Dahl viewed power as a more relationship terms, define it as the ability to get A is ability to get B to do some things that B would not otherwise do. The this focus on the capacity to influence another's behaviors. Mild vacuous view of the powers. The French philosopher Michael Sartre shifted to the focus from power as a possession to power as a networks or relationship that permeates all levels of society. Hawkins argued that power is not simply top downs from the ruler to the rules, but is disturbed and manifested in the everyday practices, institutions, knowledge, system, and discourse. For practical power, it is produced as it shapes norms, behaviors, and the social reality. Next is that is talking about the types of the power. Power can be categorized into the different forms depending upon its source and how it is exercised. First types of the power that is called the coercive powers. This is power derived from the ability to threaten, use force, fear, or punishments to gain compliances. It is based on the capacity to control other to act in a particular way under the threats of the sanctions. For the examples, military powers, police power, authoritarian regimes often rely on the uh, coercive power to maintain control in interpersonal relationship. Coercive power may be involves threats and intimations or emotional blackmails. Second, that is talk about the reward powers. When we talking about the power, that is power based on the capacity to provide rewards or benefits in exchange for the compliances or the obedience. This form of the power is based on the positive reinforcements where individuals comply in order to gain some things desirables. For examples, employers often promotions, bonuses, or salary increase to emphasize in exchange for higher performance. In relationship reward, power could involve providing affections, approvals, or shift to the gains influence over another persons. Now I am going to the next type of the power that is called the legitimate power or the authority. This is important things. These types of power is based on a belief that each a person's or institutions has a right to exercise authority and others are obliged to compile. Legitimate power often stems from law, norms, or established social structures. For examples, governments, police, judge, and religious leaders hold legitimate power when their authority is recognized by community. In organizations, managers or executives have legitimate powers because of their positions. Next is that is the expert power definitions. Power derived from the possessing specialized knowledge, skill, or expertise that others do not have. Power with expert powers are often trusted or followed because of their perceived competence. Examples: doctors, engineers, scientists, and IT specialists, while expert power because of their expertise, their opinions and decisions hold influence in the matters where their knowledge is crucial. Next is that is called the reference power. Power is based on admirations, respects, identifications with another persons. People compile because of their aspire to be like or to be associated with the individuals, buildings of the powers. Examples: celebrity, charismatics, leaders, or influencers often have referred power. Followers may be their behaviors to make decisions based on their opinions. Informational power. This form of the power is derived from the possessions of knowledge or informations that others need or desire. It is closely related to expert power, but focus especially on the ability to share or without critical informations. Journalists, intelligence agency, and corporate leaders with inside knowledge can exert power through the controls of the informations in the negotiations. The party with more informations often has the advantage. Now come to the power in political and social theory. Power has been a central theme in the political philosophy and social theory for centuries. Different theory and the schools of thoughts have developed varying approach to understandings and analyzing the powers. Now I am going to details about the power in classical political philosophy. Plato and Aristotle. In the ancient political philosophy, Plato saw power in terms of justice and the ideal state where power should be wielded by philosopher kings who possess wisdom. Aristotle, in contrast, viewed power as a practical reality in different forms of the governments, monarchy, aristocracy, democracy, and emphasized the importance of balancing power to avoid tyranny. Machiavelli, that is, in the Hind book, The Prince, offered a more pragmatic view of power, focusing on how rulers can maintain power through the both virtue and ruthless means. He famously argued that it is a better to be feared than loved one if one cannot be both, reflecting his view over the power as a tool for control and political survival. Power in Modern and Political Theory, Thomas Hobbes, in his seminal work Leviathan, Hobbes viewed power as essential to maintaining orders in society. He argued that humans in their natural states are in constant conflict due to their desire for power and self-preservation. Therefore, individuals' willingness and surrendering some of the powers to a sovereignty authority in exchange for security and the peace. John Locke's view of power was more optimistic, emphasizing the need for limited governments and the protections of individuals' rights. He argued that political power must be based on the consents of the governed and used to preserve life, liberty, and the property. Karl Marx, for Marx, power was intrinsically linked to class struggle. He saw economic power as a foundation for all other forms of the power, with capitalist class, that is bourgeois, using its control over the means of production to dominate the working class proletariats. Bourgeois and the proletariat class, Marx argued that political and social power is a reflection of economic inequality and that true power resides in the collective capacity of the working class to overthrow capitalist oppressions. Now come to the next is that is talking about the power as a discourse that is shifted the understandings of the power from the being sometimes held and wielded by a specific actors to being embedded in social structures, institutions, and discourse. In his view, power is not just repressive but also productive. It shapes norms, knowledge, and what is considered truth. Power and knowledge. that is argue that power and knowledge are interconnected. Those in power share with it accepted as knowledge, and this knowledge in terms of their reinforcements of their power. Institutions like prisons, schools, and hospitals are sites where power operations to disciplines and control individuals, often through the internationalizations of norms rather than direct coercions. Now come to the power in political system, democratic powers. In the democracy, power is typically distributed among the various branches of the government, like the executives, legislatives, and the judiciary, each checked by the law, elections, and by public opinions. Democratic power emphasizes participations, representations, and the protections of rights, with citizens holding some degree of influence over their leaders. Authoritarian powers. In authoritarian systems, power is concentrated in the hands of single leaders or a small groups with a few checks on their authority. Coercions and control over the informations are often used to maintain power. Citizens have little and no role to influencing the decision-making process. Totalitarian powers. Totalitarian regimes takes authoritarianism to extreme by the seeking to control every aspects of the life, political, social, cultural, or even the personal. Such regimes use propaganda, surveillance, and repressions to maintain absolute control over the society. Theory of power dynamics, elite theory. This theory poses that power in any society is concentrated in the hands of a small elite groups that control key institutions such as governments, business, and the military. These elites make decisions that affect society as a whole, often without significant input from the broader populations. Pluralist theory, in a contrast, pluralist theory argues that power is dispersed across various interest groups and institutions in society. No single group's dominations and power is constantly shifting through the democratic process, negotiations, and compromises. Hegemony, and that is called the introductions to the concept of hegemony, where power is maintained not just through the coercions but also through the constants of the governments. According to the Gramsci, dominant groups in society established and perpetuating their power by shaping cultural norms, value, ideology, making their rules seem natural and legitimate. Now come to the important thing, that is the power and the resistance. Power and oppressions. Power can lead to the oppressions when it's become concentrated in the hands of few and it used to marginalize or dominate others. Social movements, revolutions, and protests often arises in response to repressive abuses of the power. Resistance. Power is not absolute, and those subject to the power can resist it through the various means, non-violent protest, civil disobedience, or even revolutions. Philosophers like the emphasize that power is always contested, and act of resistance, whether a small or large, are integral to the dynamics all the things. Now come to the next slide, that is contemporary debates on the powers. Powers and the identity, that is power and identity. Modern discussions of power often focus on its role in shaping identity, particularly in terms of the genders, race, class, sexuality. Theory of intersectionality, for example, explore how powers operated are different across various axes of identity, with individuals experience operations or privilege in complex interventions or debate. Soft powers versus hard powers. In international relations, hard powers refer to the use of forces or the coercions like the military and economic sanctions, while the soft power refer to the ability to shape preference through the appeals, diplomacy, cultural influences. Countries like the US, China often balance these two forms of the powers in their foreign policy. Here I am talking about the conclusions of the powers. That is, power is multifaceted and dynamic concept, influencing almost every aspect of the human interactions, from individual relationship to the global policy. Its natures, forms, and applications vary depending upon the context, but remains a central concern in the study of governance, social dynamics, and ethics, whether viewed through the lens of coercions, consents, and cultural hegemony. Power shape both the struggles of the society and the possibility for individuals and collective actions. Now come to the second important part, that is called the totalitarianisms. Totalitarianism is a political system characterized by the centralizations of authority in the hands of a single party or the leaders, accompanied by the extensive regulations and control of public and private life. It represents an extreme forms of the authoritarianism where a state seek to dominate in all aspects of society, including economy, culture, education, and individuals' belief. Here is a detailed explorations of the totalitarianism, defining characteristics. Totalitarian regimes typically exhibit several key characteristics. One is single party rules. That means a single political party, often led by the dictators, hold absolute powers. Other political party are banned or severely restricted, and political pluralism is suppressed. Second is that is called the ideology. Totalitarian systems are often based on a specific ideology that seek to explain and guide society. This ideology is pronounced as the ultimate truth and is used to justify the regime's policy and actions. A state controls of the economy. The government exercise significant control over the economy, often through the nationalisms of the industry, central plannings, and regulations of labor. Economic decisions are made to serve the interest of the state and its ideology. Surveillance and repressions. Totalitarian regimes imply extensive surveillance and security apparatus to maintain citizens and suppress disasters. This can include the secret police informations and a state-sponsored terror in install fears and obedience. Controls of media and the informations. The state control mass media and disseminated the propaganda to shape the public perceptions and maintains ideological conformity. Interdependent journalism is typically suppressed and disseminated opinions and shares. Uh, Cults of the personality. Totalitarian's leaders often cultivate a cult of the personality, particularly themselves as a fulfillments and heroic figures. This is achieved through the propaganda, public ceremony, and their manipulations of the history to create a favorable images. Now come to the historical examples. Several regimes are often cited as examples of the totalitarianisms, like the Nazi in the Germany 1933 to 1945. Under the Adolf Hitler's, the Nazi regime sought to control all aspects of the German's life, promoting a fascist ideology centered on racial purity, and we are talking about the nationalisms. And by the way, the regimes emphasize Marxism, Leninist ideology, and that sought to be transformed society through the state control. North Korea in 1948 to the present. This is also the Kim dynasty has established a totalitarian regime characterized by the extreme cult of the personality, repressions of dissent, and a state control of all aspects of life. The regime's ideology, known as Johnson's, and emphasized self-reliance and loyalty to the ruling family. Maoist China, under the Maoist ideology and the Chinese Communist Party, sought to transform society through the radical reforms, including the Great Leap Forwards and the cultural revolutions. Dissent was harshly suppressed, ideological conformity was imposed. Next is talking about the theoretical perspective. These are the important theoretical perspective like the Benjamins, Hyman Ellis, and George Orwell. These are the different kinds of the totalitarian form of the governments. Next is mechanisms to controls. There are the different kind of the mechanisms like the propaganda through the state-controlled media, totalitarian regimes, different propaganda to promote their ideology and describe opponent. This create narratives, fear and repressions. The propaganda came through and the fear and propaganda, indoctrinations and surveillance. These are the important part of the totalitarianism. Now come to the impact of the society. That means suppressions of individual rights. Totalitarian regime typically violate fundamental human rights, including freedom of speech, assembly, beliefs, individual autonomy, in the subordinated to the interest of the states. Now the social fragmentations, this pervasive atmosphere of fear, distrust can fragment its social tie, leading to isolations and alienations among the citizens. Community may be torn apart from these types of the economic inefficiency and cultural homogenizations. Totalitarian regimes often seek to the impose of single cultural narratives, creating society diversity, diversifications. These are the things. Now come to the that is called the resistance and the change that is in the totalitarian system, grassroots movements, international pressures, and internal conflicts. That means these are the important resistance by the totalitarian government. Now come to the conclusion part. In the totalitarianisms represent one of the most extreme forms of the political operations, seeking to control every aspect of the life through ideology, repressions, and the surveillance. The study of religions regimes provides valuable insights into the nature of power and the importance of individual rights and the potentials for resistance against oppressive systems. Understandings religions serve as a reminders to the practicalities of the freedoms and need for vigilance in protecting democratic value. These are the importance lectures on the tourism. Thank you. Thank for hearing the lectures.